Automotive companies are, by and large, rational enterprises. Picture serious people wearing serious suits sitting around a serious conference table. The result is very often serious vehicles. But what would happen if a company wasn't quite so serious? Let's say they went to work dressed as their favorite superhero and sat around in a circle in beanbag chairs. I think the car that would result would be something like this, the Hiphi Z.
The Z is unlike any sedan I've ever seen, but that shouldn't come as a complete surprise, considering that Hiphi's first model, the X, was unlike any SUV I'd ever seen. But with the Z, they took things about 10 steps further.
How does one even begin to describe the styling of this car? Well, the Hiphi X definitely had a touch of futurism about it, but this is pure, 100% uncut sci-fi. I feel like it harkens back to a time when jetpacks felt inevitable, when rocket-powered transportation was always just around the corner. It may not have the same level of beauty as American production and concept cars of the 50s and 60s, but I think it captures the same spirit, just with a whiff of cryptocurrency about it.
The Z is plastered with LEDs both front and rear, including a matrix of LEDs that can be used to display images.
Now, this technology was available on the Hiphi X and has since proliferated to other Chinese EVs here in the Chinese market. However, this thing has something that they don't have, and that is the Star Ring Wraparound ISD light curtain. That's 4,066 individual LEDs. So what that means is, not only can it display images on the front and the rear, it can also do it on the doors as well. Now, interestingly enough, for a car that's only available in the Chinese market, it can currently only display all caps English letters, no Chinese.
This thing has a monstrous wheelbase of 3.15 meters. That's longer than a Neo ET7, but shorter than an S-Class. Squeezed into that space is an equally monstrous 120 kilowatt-hour ternary lithium battery pack that delivers 705 kilometers of range on China's CLTC standard. The wheels are 22 inches all around and hide an all-aluminum double wishbone front suspension and a 5-link rear. Those are combined with an air suspension with continuous damping control. Not only that, it has rear steer, giving it a turning radius similar to a Mini Cooper, despite measuring slightly over 5 meters in length.
The LEDs are great for displaying messages when you're parked, but they also serve a dual purpose here on the rear end, where they distract from the fact that it is, well, somewhat awkward from certain angles. I can't tell if it looks more like a Cyclops or a robot with unfortunate eyebrows. Like the Hiphi X before it, the Z has electronically operated doors, which can either be opened via a button here on the key fob or using a button on the B pillar. It also has built-in sensors to make sure those doors don't open up into any cars, curbs, or humans that might be in the way. It also has a show-off mode. Of course, if I just hit the button here,
To close the door, just press the brake pedal.
the interior of the Hiphi Z is a big departure from the X, not just in terms of material and design, but of course in terms of equipment as well. Gone is the digital instrument cluster of the X, as well as the huge 19-inch passenger screen, and in their place is a single 15-inch center screen and an HUD. But wait, before you change your channel to a more interesting video, let me tell you some more about this center screen, because it's unlike any you have ever seen. As you can tell, it is mounted on 3 beautifully machined robotic arms. Not only do those arms allow it to twist from landscape to portrait and vice versa, they also allow it to tilt up to 4 degrees. Now, that can happen via the menu, which you adjust on the steering wheel, or it'll happen automatically if you simply move your seat. Never seen that before. If you really want to put it through its paces, just put it into this mode. Kind of looks like a Backstreet Boys video, but still pretty cool. If you're more of the hands-on type, you can unlock the screen here and then adjust it manually, like so. This brings me to one of the more interesting things about this car's UI, which I think is a very well thought out and easy to use one. These bars at the bottom act as shortcuts. There's the unlock button, as I mentioned. There's also a volume over here for passengers. And in the middle is the most important part. On the left, you have the temperature adjustment for the driver's climate zone, and then fan speed in the middle, and then passenger's temperature adjustment over on this side. The reason this is interesting to me is because this way you don't have to first open up the AC menu and then select these things. You can do it simply from the main page. But that's not the only interesting thing about this UI. There's also this 3D model of the car. Now, I've seen that in other cars, but this one has a level of detail that I don't often see. This was rendered in Unreal Engine, and it looks very, very cool. You can, of course, control everything from the front and the door openings and the trunk opening, but you can also get into the car as well, just like that. Here you will find the controls for all of your AC functions. The fence can be manually adjusted, for example, and you can also go to the back row and adjust your things like that, your AC. The final and most interesting thing to note about this combination of center screen and HUD is that the HUD and the information here on the top left of the screen, your vital driving information, your speed and gear and driving mode, well, they use a separate system than the one that is used for the center screen. What that means is it's redundant. If the center screen has an issue, say you have a black screen, which happens sometimes in modern cars, especially new ones, well, this thing in the corner will still display your driving information, as will the HUD. That way you don't have to worry about not being able to see how fast you're going just because your center screen had a problem.
Unlike the incredible minimalism of the Hi-Fi X, the Z uses a much more vibrant mix of materials, patterns, and colors. It's certainly more visually interesting, but there's quite a bit more hard plastic as well.
There's one more screen I need to mention before we jump into the back seat, and that's up here. This is a digital rear view mirror, a camera-based rear view mirror, because, as you might notice, there's no rear window in this car. So if you want to back it up, you're going to need that. Despite the use of suicide rear doors, it's actually not that easy to get into the back seat of the Hi-Fi Z. That's because of the huge wheels and the fact that the seats are pushed way back into the wheelbase. As a result, you kind of just have to fall into it. Ugh. In a related note, I think you'll find that the trunk space or boot space in this car is a little bit lacking. I complained about the measly boot space in the Neo ET7, and that was 364 liters. This is an even measlier 316 liters. The only saving grace for this one is that these seats can be laid down flat, so it has a pass-through. When you want to close the door in this car, you don't really reach for the door itself, but rather the button here on the headliner. What we have here is a 5-seater version of the Hi-Fi Z, but there is a 4-seater version that's also available. In fact, Hi-Fi tells us that a majority of their customers are choosing the 4-seater. In terms of price, the 4-seater cost $91,000 US, while this one, the 5-seater, starts at around $88,000 US. The big difference between the two? Well, in the case of the 5-seater like this, you can fold up the center armrest. Either way, both of them have a small LCD screen here where you control things like the media, the air conditioning, and even the tilt of your seats. They also have a 23-speaker Meridian sound system as standard. Being able to lean your seat forward and back is great, but it doesn't resolve the two biggest problems I have with this rear seat. The first is that it's as dark as a medieval prison, thanks to the fact that there's very little glass other than the highly tinted glass above your head. There's also the fact that the floor, well, it's just really, really high, thanks to that huge battery pack underneath. Normally, you'd be able to alleviate that by pushing your feet under the seat in front of you, but that's not possible in the Hi-Fi Z. Like so many smart EVs these days, the Hi-Fi Z comes equipped with a bunch of advanced driver assistance systems, all powered by a suite of sensors. That includes the large LiDAR unit mounted above the windshield there, and it also includes millimeter wave radars, and of course, a camera or two, including this one mounted on the B-pillar. Notice how it kind of pokes out a little bit as opposed to be integrating into the actual B-pillar itself. This is different than Tesla does it, and Hiphi says that this way has a better angle or a better field of view. I don't really know if that's true or not. All I know is it looks a little bit funny, but it's hardly the strangest thing about this design. Now let's jump in the driver's seat and see how it is on the road. Unfortunately, this is a pre-production vehicle, so the ADAS features have not been enabled yet, and we won't be able to experience them today. What we will be able to experience today is this car's performance, and with looks this outlandish, it should have outlandish levels of performance to match. To that end, they gave it front and rear-mounted electric motors with a total of 494 kilowatts and 820 newton-meters of torque. 0 to 100 kilometers per hour, that's about 3.8 seconds. Not the fastest car on the road, but the way that it gets to that speed is appropriately dramatic. All four wheels scramble for traction all the way up to, say, 150 kilometers per hour. I like a touch of drama in my big, fast EVs. One thing I love to see from my big EV sedans, but certainly don't expect at this point, having driven so many other ones, is engaging driving dynamics. But somehow, the Hiphi Z actually delivers. It's not just fast, it actually feels good to drive. The steering, for example, is not just direct, it actually has feeling. It feels planted on the road as well. The suspension, the body, it feels very solid. It feels well engineered like a car that can actually handle. I'm not used to that. I've driven a lot of Chinese EV sedans, and some of them are impressively fast and not too bad in the handling department. Take the IM-L7, for example. But most of them are much more like the Neo ET7. They're just big, soft, and comfortable. The Hiphi Z actually feels like it can handle. My other big takeaway, having experienced this car inside and out, is the fact that it feels like a lot of thought was put into every aspect of it. The screen, as I mentioned, has a great UI with lots of little shortcuts and features that make it easy to use. The driving experience even has its own shortcuts. For example, there are paddles here behind the steering wheel. Not only can they be used to change the driving mode, but if you pull both at the same time, you switch over to changing your regen settings. Change it to the highest setting, and you can actually use complete one-pedal driving. It will bring the car completely to a stop. That's really nice and user-friendly.
The adjustable air suspension also gives it quite a range of personalities. Comfort mode isn't quite as soft as some competitors, but it makes the accelerator a bit less jumpy and smooths out bumps.
The Hiphi Z might not be rocket-powered, but if this is a glimpse at what our future holds, I can tell you one thing. It may not be pretty, and it may not be practical, but it's sure as heck going to be interesting.